Hey, Cece got a
Cece
talk
got a talk
show.
show.
You got a talk show? Go ahead
Go
now,
ahead now,
Cece.
Cece.
Hi, welcome to the Safe Space CC Show. I'm Safe Space CC, aka Sinclair, the nature loving psychotherapist. I'm so excited to have my co-host with me today, educator, researcher, and new business owner, Brianna Green.
Hi.
Today's life lesson is brought to us by Isolate. Isolate was taken while I was in my parents' yard. I saw this beauty was alone from the other flowers, but was still standing out so perfectly and beautifully by itself. If you have read my book and blog entry, you'll see that this picture was taken in 2018, but I didn't realize that it was speaking to me later after that. Around 2019, 2020 was times where I was studying for my LCSW exam, which I failed the first time. And I was also going through a breakup. So it was a real difficult time for me to focus on life. I needed to isolate and focus on God and wait for his guidance for what was my next direction in life. I'm so glad to have Brianna here co-hosting with me today. We both entered into North Carolina State University in August 2012. And after like 5.5 years, we are reunited.
Yes, and it feels so natural.
So amazing.
So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so with that said, I feel like she would be a great person to have this discussion with about spending time alone and waiting for God's guidance. I just want to talk about what the last 5 years have looked like, or what spending time alone and waiting for guidance looks like for you.
I think physically isolated, Michigan meant a lot. I had lived with folks since 2012. So when I got to grad school in Michigan, it was just totally new to do everything only for yourself. Mm-hmm. Like how loud you played the music only affected you, and like when you washed the dishes only affected you. But it was the first time I didn't have a support system right there. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely was the first time I was physically alone and felt alone. There are times that you feel alone when people are around you, and you isolate within a community. But when there's no community there, like you really are, and I was really relying on God in those times, differently than I had before. So it looked like I joined this is really interesting. I joined a Bible study, and I remember right as I was moving, it was like the Thursday before I packed up. I had to go to Target to get something, and this lady stopped me and she asked to pray for me. And we exchanged numbers, and she was like, "Can you come to this thing Saturday?" And I was like, "I'm literally moving to Michigan." And when I got in Michigan, I called one of my best friends and we started doing Bible study together. And I think in that time, not only did I know that I needed to rely on God in a certain way, I knew that I also needed support in reestablishing like my faith and how I wanted to have God represented in my life, I think. Because in undergrad, I had stopped going to church. And I don't know if that's the experience of other people, but like I had stopped going to church in undergrad. My faith didn't stop there, but church and the body and how I was interacting with God had shifted. So, yeah, it looked like asking for help. It looked like, even though I had I think a strong prayer life, it looked like I wanted to understand God differently. And isolation helped me to see that I wanted to understand God differently, that I wanted to see him as bigger and understand him as like fuller. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you feel? How do you feel like you are on the other side, or do you feel like you are still in this isolation process, or do you feel like you're on the other side of something?
No, and I think you ebb and flow in isolation. Like, I think noise just comes. So I think there's different times that you have to say, like, I'm going to isolate to be more disciplined in whatever area. Or, yeah, like, I think isolation is just necessary for clarity. Mm-hmm. So do I feel like I'm on the other side? I think that because you isolate at different seasons and you isolate for different reasons, like, I have more people right now. I don't feel like I'm necessarily in a space of isolation, but it might be necessary for the next thing that I need. Gotcha. That's kind of how I view it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I think an issue for me right now is that I need to isolate. I think I know that in the last 2 years I entered into like a new environment, and I took on so much, like, emotionally. And I think it brought a lot of insight into maybe what is next, but I feel like maybe isolation is necessary for me in this next season. And I think that is so funny because I'm always isolated from the people that I love. I don't know if I'm a good person to talk about isolation because I am so recluse. Such a complicated relationship with separation and people. But I feel like internally isolation means something when I'm there versus when I'm not talking to people. Does that make sense?
A little bit.
Like I can be isolated from everyone around me, but that's like a physical isolation. And emotionally, I don't feel like I'm isolated from them because nothing within me is in turmoil.
Yeah, okay.
And so when I think about isolation, I think about it as a spiritual turmoil, almost like a spiritual yearning or sadness, than just being physically not connected to you in proximity or in how long I've talked to you.
Gotcha.
So like you introduced that I'm a new business owner. I'm really excited about serving young people by way of educational training for teachers and workshops for parents, and just partnering with different organizations to make those opportunities possible. And so needing maybe some isolation in order to really you get that in the world, you know, promoting myself and making the connections that are necessary. And so even in that, that's an isolation that's going to require networking. And so I recognize that it's going to require that networking and intention behind just everything moving forward. And so feeling like that isolation is necessary so that just the chaos of the world isn't clouding how I want to, you know, move forward.
Yeah. It's like I have a maybe complicated relationship with isolation because with being in this field, I would love to communicate with more people, but at the same time, I feel like because I don't want to use it as an excuse, but because I'm talking to people all day, like in a therapeutic setting, outside of the therapeutic setting, I'm trying to stay focused and work on all things safe space CC, but sometimes CC don't want to talk to more people outside of work, like, and so it's like I'm trying to be isolated in this period in my life, but I guess in a different way. I guess like you said, I don't know what I'm trying to. I don't know what I'm necessarily trying to get at, but I love being alone. I love being alone, but I recognize that in this period I need to branch out more, and it's different. And I guess that's where it's difficult. That's where I'm at right now.
And I think that maybe that's a better way of describing what I'm thinking, right? Like, I'm okay with being alone, and that isolation that I'm describing is that more spiritual affect, if that makes sense. And then as you were talking, another way that I'm thinking about isolation, in your book you talk about how the flower is like standing, out among the bunch. And one thing that really determined why I moved back to North Carolina during my program in a different state is wanting to isolate from what was like my research grad community to find kind of like a new identity, or my identity, or reclaim my identity in a way. But I also wanted to isolate because I just wanted to figure out what was next for me. I got away from, like university kind of settings. I went back to like a small town. I wasn't around like college friends or grad friends or anything that felt normal or familiar in a way. And I think it helped me to pinpoint, isolate, if you will, the skills that I really want to strengthen, and the things that I really want to learn more about. And so I think isolation in that way, which I think is a more physical way perhaps, is good to not get lost in who and what the world tells you to be.
So with you being a new business owner, an educator, and a researcher, can you give us a little background on your undergrad degree, your master's degree, and your path now? I know you just touched a little bit on your plans of reaching out and collaborating with educators and stuff.
Right, so I started at NC State in engineering, and I started working at the YMCA, and I loved it. And then eventually I was like, I know I don't want to do engineering, but I really don't know what I want to do. I studied education, and in my 5th year, I started on a research project that allowed for me to stay on for my master's. And I fell in love with working with teachers, doing professional development with teachers. In one way, it was like project management, but what I really enjoy now and what my work is instructional design, instructional coaching, curriculum design. So I worked with some nonprofits when I was in Raleigh and Durham. Started studying specifically Black students' motivational beliefs. I think it's important that we understand like what their perceptions of their classrooms and their environments and their experiences are, and started to take that work. That work allowed for me to enroll in a PhD program, and I love it. Right now I am on a leave of absence, which I feel like is not talked about a lot in grad programs, like needing that space maybe. But it's allowed for me to really sow the oats of my educational consulting firm. And like I said, I want to help. I see the gaps in where teachers need support, where substitutes need training. They're not the same, job, but they want to still serve students well. In the work that I've done, I see where parents need more guidance sometimes on how they can support their young people. And those kind of things are really important to me. So in the next step, it's working with folks that, need that support, or want to design really cool things to just continue to educate our young people. So
as you just said, what you've since taking your leave of absence. Thank you for discussing that. Being comfortable discussing that. Because I think that it takes a lot of courage to talk about. Because, like you said, it's not talked about enough, and just the emotional turmoil that comes with making those kind of decisions. But with you saying that, do you feel like, and this is just me just connecting as you just said that now, taking that leave of absence and being exposed to the experience that you're currently gaining in the education system, that's a way of isolating and waiting for God's guidance, because you're isolating from the approach.
What are other reasons that you've had to isolate in your life?
Wow, thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Because
2020 was a while ago. Like, I think the pandemic made us isolate.
Yeah.
Like that is something to even talk about. Yeah.
Since 2020, thankfully things have been well. Because I try to be so aware of my emotions. I don't do much. Like, when I say I'm so chill, I mean, we haven't seen each other in like 5 years. So I try to not do too much.
That is not true. That's not true. The craziest thing about this moment, Sierra, is that you photographed the cover, or you photographed pictures of me and my friend for our book.
Yeah, now I don't hang out much. So I really, if I feel overwhelmed from work, if I feel overwhelmed emotionally because I overthink and I'm in my head all the time, I go take a walk. I go out to nature, just to talk to some squirrels, take some pictures of squirrels. And the park that I go to now, there's deer, and like I walk by them and I be scared out of my mind, but I love it. And turtles and stuff. Of course the geese, but yeah. So there hasn't really been
a reason to isolate outside of how you already take care of yourself.
Yeah, because I am a big advocate for maintaining mental wellness and what ways work for you. I'm a big advocate for focusing on what's in your control. Like, I try to focus on what's in my control. If it's not in my control, like, I'm not about to stress myself out for it. I already live in my head making up scenarios that don't exist. It's probably not gonna happen. Like, why am I gonna stress myself out about things out of my control? I think that's done a little much. So yeah.
I think another aspect that you're talking, the leave of absence was also onset by grief, and really feeling like I needed to isolate to manage just loss. Because outside of that, I find my daily coping ways of getting away, or like, I don't want to talk to you right now, but I think the other part of just the seasons of isolation is that some things out of our control just happen, and we need that time.
Yeah.
We really just need that time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thank you, researcher, educator, and new business owner Brianna, for co-hosting with me today. I think this was an amazing discussion.
Yes.
This is episode 5, and I feel more and more comfortable each episode I do. I don't know if I felt more comfortable. I don't know if I felt more comfortable with this episode because in my crib, or because like it's you. I don't know, but I think this was a great discussion, and I look forward to. I hope that we can have more. I hope that you will co-host more episodes with me.
I'll be honored.
Yeah. All right, so thank you for joining me. I look forward to whatever is in store for next week. So join me and let's work through our trauma together.
See you later.
The Safe Space CC Show. I like that, CC. Let's work through our trauma together.